Hi, I'm Sandy Irani. I'm a professor in the computer science department at UC Irvine, and I'm going to tell you today about my experience in creating an online version of our discrete math class, ICS-6D, at UC Irvine. And one of the premises of my paper is that it's possible to create for students a humanized and personalized experience through the online format. So we have the opportunity today to test out that hypothesis through this video talk. So the title of the paper is Incorporating Active Learning Strategies and Instructor Presence into an Online Discrete Mathematics Class. And my co-author is Cameron Denaro from the Teaching and Learning Center at UC Irvine, and she was instrumental in analyzing the data for the student performance in comparing the face-to-face and online version of the classes. So the upper right corner of every slide of this talk will have my email address as shown here. Feel free to send me an email at any point about the content of this talk, and I'd be happy to answer your question if I can. Also, I will be monitoring my email in real time while the video is playing. So if you have a question and want it answered right away, send me an email and I will shoot you back an answer as soon as I can. So let me first tell you a little bit about the discrete math class at UCI. These are big classes. We typically teach about 400 plus students per course, and we do this every quarter. The course has a weekly structure, pretty traditional for a math class. 3 50-minute lectures per week, 1 hour of discussion with smaller groups, and when I say smaller, I mean about 100 students or so. There are weekly written homework assignments that the students turn in. We use GradeScope for grading and management of the assignments. I give 3 midterms and 1 final exam. I like the 3 midterm format because it tends to spread out the pressure a little bit and keep students up to date with the class. And I applied for and received an ILTI grant, which is a University of California program to create online classes. So the grant was specifically to create an online version of ICS-6D. The grant allowed me to buy out of 1 course, so there was a lot of work in putting this content together. And about 1 course buyout was approximately right in terms of the time that it took me to develop the videos and the material. So the reason I decided to create an online version of ICS-6D is that I felt that at the scale of 400 students, we had already lost many of the benefits of interaction of a face-to-face class. And so I might as well put some of that content online so that students could access it at their leisure in a more flexible format. And that would free me up to interact with students in other ways. I like to quote a colleague of mine, David Kay from UC Irvine, who says distance learning starts in the 10th row, and there's a certain truth to that. So I figured some of this lecture material where students are sitting, taking in content, can be put in video format, and then I can interact with them in smaller settings. I had some very specific goals in mind when I created this course. This is the first online course I had ever done. And I wanted to see if I could, first of all, combine the benefits of active learning strategies, which we know are very effective in a face-to-face format, and combine that with the flexibility of an online class. I also wanted to create a personal experience for students. I want students to be aware that there was a person there monitoring the class, engaged with the class, and interested in their progress. And research shows that students tend to perform better when they feel a connection with the instructor of the class. I also wanted students to feel part of a larger community. So I wanted students to be able to connect with and be aware of each other. It's also important in an online format to provide plenty of course structure so that students know what is expected by what time, and they're encouraged to stay on track. So here's the Canvas homepage for the class. The weeks are laid out 0 through 9. We have a 10-week quarter at UCI. And the students can access the content of any particular week through these navigation buttons. So let's navigate, for example, to week 4. So here's the roadmap for week 4. We start with 2 videos, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second. And we have a list of all of the activities that the students are expected to engage in during week 4. There are reading assignments through the zybook. There are lectures that they're supposed to view online. There's a reminder of the discussion section, which I'll say more about later, which happens through Zoom. And then there's the weekly homework assignment, which they complete offline and turn in through GradeScope. So the video on the right is an introduction to number theory, and it just so happens that week 4 begins a new topic, And every time we start a new topic, there's a video introducing that topic from a high level. Every week starts out with a check-in video. So the check-in videos are short 1 to 2 minute videos that I film right here in my office. I make these fresh with every offering of the class. And what I have to say is tuned to what's going on with the class at any particular moment. Sometimes the students may need a pep talk because the scores on a recent midterm weren't quite as high as we had hoped. Sometimes I give a heads up about a particularly difficult topic around the corner, or sometimes just a reminder of a midterm next week. The content that I convey is certainly important information for them to have. It replaces the 1 to 2 minutes of banter that I usually do at the beginning of a lecture. But it's also important that I'm just letting them know that I'm here participating in the course just like they are. So let's take a deeper dive into how the video lectures are structured. I use the survey feature of Canvas, and each survey contains approximately 15 to 30 minutes of total video time. The videos themselves are shorter in length. They range in length from 3 to 8 minutes, and each video is followed by a multiple choice question. These are exactly the clicker questions that I use normally in big lectures face to face. The solutions to the questions are then given in the next video in the sequence. Students get participation points for completing the lecture by the due date, and this is all enforced through Canvas. I created the videos for the lectures using a video editing software package called Camtasia, which goes for about $170. There are cheaper and even free video editing software packages out there. I particularly like Camtasia because it has a rich set of video editing features that allow me to edit out all the ums and the ahs that seem to crop up whenever I press the record button. The videos are in screen share mode, so the students see my screen and it's voice over. Some of the material is typed up in advance, and some of the material is handwritten on my tablet as we go. This is the way I give lectures in a face-to-face class as well. I find that it's nice to have definitions and important concepts typed up in advance so I get them right. But when I'm working through an example, I like to talk as I go. That way the students see my thought process as I'm solving a problem. It also keeps everybody more engaged, including myself. So this is what students see as they're working through one of the video lectures. The list on the right shows the sequence of videos and questions. These items denoted spacers are really just the videos. So we have a video, then a question, a video, then a question. And the students can put the videos in full screen mode if they like. And they navigate through the lecture using these next buttons to get to the next item on the list. So just like the face-to-face course, the online course is structured in a weekly format. The material for a given week is released on Wednesday at 8 a.m. And then the students are asked to complete a sequence of readings and lectures. Ideally, the students will complete these in the order prescribed. So there's a reading and then a lecture on that material, then another reading and another lecture on that material. But this particular ordering isn't necessarily enforced. They just all need to be completed by Monday at 10 a.m. Then on Monday, we have discussions. So the class is divided into 4 discussions. So each student is enrolled in 1 hour of discussion, and students are required to attend the discussion in which they're enrolled. And I'll describe discussions in a minute and let you know why we enforce that particular rule. And then finally, the following Wednesday at 1 p.m., the written homework is due. Both the online and the face-to-face version of the class use the Discrete Math Zybook. A Zybook is an interactive web-based text replacement. The Zybook system timestamps the activities of each student, so that allows me to give credit for completing the reading assignment by the due date. And I have to say the Zybook works equally well in the face-to-face and online format. I'm a little biased because I am the author of the Discrete Math Zybook in collaboration, of course, with the whole Zybooks team. So when I designed this course, I specifically didn't want to have a course that was entirely asynchronous. I wanted there to be a specific time every week where students came together in groups to engage with the course material and to engage with each other as a community. And for this reason, I decided to hold discussions in real time using Zoom, a video conferencing platform. Normally, in a face-to-face course, I would have the TAs run the discussion, but since I didn't have to spend time preparing and delivering lectures, I covered the discussion myself. So the content of the discussion is largely driven by student questions. Students are encouraged to post questions on Piazza and make requests for me to cover specific topics. Most often, students would request to see an example of a problem similar to something that they would have on the homework. During the discussions, the students are muted, but they are able to ask questions through a side chat box, and this usually resulted in a very lively discussion. Typically, when I'm running the discussion, I can monitor the questions in real time and answer them verbally as they go. Occasionally, the comments would go by too quickly, and I always had a TA monitoring the chat box and answering questions in written form if I couldn't keep up. As the instructor, I was on camera at the beginning and end of the discussion, but most of the discussion itself was voice over with screen share. These few minutes spent bantering with the students as they slowly came online just before the discussion started were some of the most enjoyable moments of the course for me. Mostly students chose not to show themselves on video, but one time there was a guy in his dorm room with his roommates behind him strumming a guitar. So for fun, I decided to unmute him, and he serenaded the class for a little while as everyone came online for the started discussion. Another week, I had to record the check-in video in my home, and my cat decided to come and sit beside me while I created the video. So there was a lot of conversation in the next discussion about my cat. So these are little things, but it does kind of help to make the course more fun and shows that even in an online forum, you can connect with the students and have some fun. On a more serious note, in addition to the content that I would go through at the request of the students, I also incorporated an active learning component to the discussions. So 2 to 3 times in the discussion, I would stop and pose a question to the students and give them time to work it out on their own. I encourage them to get together in their dorms or wherever they happen to be and work in groups. But each individual student then had to submit his or her answer into Canvas using the quiz format. So I was able to create this quiz in advance before the discussion started. And after posing a question to the students, I would open up that quiz to the group of students who were enrolled in the discussion that I was currently conducting. So students had a fairly short window of time, much like a clicker question, to come to the correct solution. And I would use the chat box to monitor the time appropriately because I didn't always know in advance how long it would take them. So I'd ask, do you need more time? Are you guys done? And they would let me know if they needed more time, and I adjusted the time accordingly. And I'd always give them a couple minutes warning when I was about to close the quiz so that they could get something submitted. These were graded very generously for participation only, so anytime a student made a credible attempt at the question, they'd get full credit for participation. I should say a few words here about testing because that's always a challenge for an online class. I like to give handwritten tests with lots of short answer questions, and that's best done in an in-person format. So I offered the exams on campus in person. I was able to reserve a large lecture hall for the tests to be held on campus. I had to pick a fairly unpopular time in order to be able to reserve the room, so tests were always Fridays from 4 to 5. And students were required to be available during this time. So as part of the registration process, the Friday 4 to 5 time had to be blocked out on their schedule as if they had a regularly scheduled class during that time. Because it was an online class, I was also obliged to give the students the option of taking the test off-site. So I provided for the class a list of valid testing centers where they could go in and take the test if they chose to do that. So in order to determine whether the online format had a serious impact on student performance, I did a comparison of the Winter 19 offering of SIGCSE, which was online, to the Winter 17 offering of SIGCSE, which was face-to-face. I taught both classes, and the structure of the classes was largely the same, except for the mode of instruction. There's one exception to this, which is that in the face-to-face version of the class, I didn't require students to attend discussion, so there wasn't an active learning component for which they were given some participation credit. These were largely voluntary sessions which students dropped in on if they felt that they needed extra help in the class. As a result, in the face-to-face version of the class, attendance at discussion was rather low. So in the online version, attendance was quite high because there was this component for which they were graded, which is the participation activities. I used exam performance as the basis for comparison. The tests in both classes had similar structure and very similar questions. And this allowed me to make a meaningful comparison in the performance in the two offerings. So here's a plot that shows the comparison of student performance in the two offerings. The score given is the average score as a percentage over all the tests. The middle line shown here is the median student score. So as you can see in the online version, it was slightly higher than the face-to-face version. The upper and lower boundaries of the boxes show the 75th and 25th percentiles accordingly. So the performance is very comparable. Some past studies that compare online and face-to-face classes have discovered that the online format disproportionately affects students at the lower end of the academic spectrum. So in order to study this phenomenon, we use GPAO as a proxy for student achievement. The GPAO is the GPA of each student in the courses other than ICS-6D in the same quarter. So the y-axis here shows the average score in ICS-6D, and the x-axis is the GPA in their other classes outside of ICS-6D. So as you would expect, scores in ICS-6D correlate positively with a higher GPA. But the important point that we see is that there's not a big difference between the performance in the face-to-face here shown in red and the online shown in blue on any point of this spectrum. So even at the lower end of the GPAO, so these are the students with lower GPAs in their other classes, there's not a significant difference between the online and face-to-face versions of the class. My co-author, Cameron Denaro, was able to access information about the students, such as their demographic characteristics, gender, whether they're from an underrepresented minority group, whether they're first generation to college, and their GPAO, their GPA in their other courses. And after adjusting for all of these factors, we discovered that the median score in the online class was 0.16% higher than the face-to-face class. This 0.16% isn't terribly significant, as the confidence intervals indicate that we're 95% confident that the true difference in course performance for the online and face-to-face format is between minus 1.04% and plus 1.07%. So we would view these results in the two offerings as basically comparable when adjusting for all of the other demographic characteristics. As part of the ILTI grant, which funded the development of this course, I was asked to administer an online survey to assess the effectiveness of the online format. 315 out of the eligible 381 students participated in the survey. The table here shows the results to 10 Likert-type survey questions with 7 possible responses, where 0 represents strongly disagree and 6 represents strongly agree. The responses were overall very positive, and especially in regards to whether students felt they had an opportunity to have questions answered and whether the online tools helped them learn the course content. The relatively low standard deviation shows a high degree of consistency in the ratings. So the response to questions like there was adequate opportunities to have questions answered, the instructor, professor had a positive active presence in the course, I was satisfied with the level of interaction with the instructor, all had reasonably high scores out of 6. The survey also included more open-ended questions, asking about what they liked best and liked least about the online format of the class. Many students responded enthusiastically, citing in particular that they liked the flexibility of the online format. Some comments specifically mention aspects of the course design, such as the lectures were split into short clips, which help keep lessons concise. The quizzes after each clip and the explanations for the answers were very helpful. And I found the professor's online discussions done over Zoom useful. We could interact with her, but it was still technically online. Honestly, I participated in these discussions more than I do in my other in-person classes. So to summarize, the elements of the course design included clicker questions embedded into the pre-recorded online lectures, interactive discussions by video conference, active learning exercises built into online discussions, and frequent on-camera presence of the instructor. We found that learning outcomes in comparison between an online and face-to-face version of the classes were comparable, and there was a high level of student satisfaction with the online course. And I feel like the topic of online education is especially pertinent right now because we unfortunately seem to be about to embark on a massive and global experiment with online education as more students are told to stay home and more universities are putting all of their classes online, at least temporarily.
In terms of the student feedback, there are definitely areas where we can improve the quality of the course. Some students found that it was difficult to stay on track without face-to-face meetings. Some students reported feeling more isolated in the online class, and some expressed a desire for more ways to meet fellow students to work with. So these are things that can definitely be improved. So I can imagine using Piazza to help students connect with each other and form homework groups. I've also heard that homework parties sometimes are successful in getting students together on campus to collaborate on homework questions.
So thank you for taking the time today to listen to my presentation. I hope you found the video format effective. And I want to encourage you, if you have any suggestions, comments, or questions, to contact me by email and let me know about them.